Okay.
You're all set.
Thank you. And good evening. My name is Fred Chase, and I will momentarily call to order this meeting of the Rules and Procedures Committee of the Bridgewater Town Council. Today is October 3rd, 2023, and I'll read the COVID disclosure into the record. Pursuant to Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2020, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency and the March 31, 2025 extension granted by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. This meeting for the town of Bridgewater will be fully remote and accessible to the public through remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance is permitted. Citizens who wish to tune in to the meeting may do so via Zoom. I make note of the fact that we have a quorum present this evening. I'm joined by Councilors Paul Murphy and Brad McKinnon, and I'll just refer to the agenda for tonight's meeting. The call to order. I will just make note of the fact that this meeting is being recorded and aired for future broadcast. And the first item on our agenda this evening is the approval of minutes from the meeting of July 27th, 2023. And I would entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. And if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Murphy?
Yes.
Councilor McKinnon?
Yes.
And Councilor Chase?
Yes.
3 in favor, 0 opposed.
That's great. Thank you. With that item dispensed, the next item on our agenda this evening is public comment. I don't believe there are any members of the public present. Is that true, Debbie?
There is no one present.
Okay, fine. We can move past public comment. So there are 2 items before us that have recently been referred by the town council. The first is item A, proposed ordinance FY 22-008, Bridgewater Town Charter, Article 2, Legislative Branch, Annual Stipend. And I'll just firstly ask each of the councilors present if they have any particular comments or concerns or questions that they'd like to enter into the record first with respect to the stipend matter.
The only question I really have is that price can be lowered or raised at any point after it is put through, right? If the voters vote for it.
Well, that's what we're going to be discussing. That's one of the items is the point you make about whether the amount of a stipend, if a stipend is approved for payment to councilors, can it be adjusted in the future? How would it be adjusted? Can it be adjusted both up and down? And so that's definitely one of the subtopics of this subject that we're going to deal with tonight. So I guess it's largely dependent upon what we agree to tonight, but that'll certainly be something that we'll discuss in turn.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul, anything in particular otherwise on your mind just to kick it off?
Yeah, I only had a question about whether or not an exact date should be included in here in terms of when town councilors will receive payment. I didn't know if we wanted to specify it because in here it just says annual stipend. But I thought that may be important, especially as it relates to elections and just how the calendar would play out.
I think that's a good point. I kind of wondered about that previously. In other words, it's not just a question of when a counselor might receive this stipend, but in part it's also a question of what specific period of time does the stipend cover? So that our town election is at the end of April every year. I guess one school of thought would be that much like when we reorganize after each election, we have a reorganization meeting, and maybe that would be kind of the kickoff to what would be the year for payment of a salary. But that's an outstanding question, and I think we should consider that, and something we can talk about. We can talk about tonight, certainly.
And Councilor Chase, sorry, just on that point, you said during that kickoff meeting potentially would be date of payment, or that's when the term would start?
Oh, well, I was thinking that would be when the term would start.
Right.
Well, since you raised the point, I guess the question would be, could it also be the date of payment? Are we being paid? Are we being paid for prospectively for the year ahead? Right. Are we being paid at the end of the year in arrears for the time we've already served? I think you're absolutely right. That's a question that's got to be nailed down. Whether it has to be in the charter is I guess a question, but I think I'd certainly prefer to see it in the charter. What's in the charter should be what gives us certainty as to what is going to happen. And so I think you've raised a good point, and that's something I think let's talk about tonight. So I'll just make a note to myself that that's what we're going to talk about, the term. I'll call it term of payment, but we know what we mean. So where to begin? Actually, Deb, you know what? Deb, could you check to see if you did receive the one-page thing I sent to you?
I did.
Oh, okay. Could you open that and share it? I think I said that was actually for the other item, but it's not. It is for the stipend.
Yes. How do I share it myself? It's not coming up.
Okay.
Share screen. There it is. All right. I know it's here. Here it is. Do you see it?
It's come. Yes, I see it now. And you guys can see it as well, I hope?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is just one page. We don't have to read this whole thing, but I'll just tell you what my thinking was in preparing it. It just refers to the legislation, the stipend proposal. I made note of the fact that Councilor Gallagher made the recommendation as to the amounts that we've been talking about and that we did actually vote upon at the council meeting. $5,000 per year for each councilor, $7,500 for the council president, with adjustments to be made by ordinance. That was his proposal, Councilor Gallagher's proposal at our last council meeting. At which point, Attorney Rollins interjected that he had concern that the charter amendment, using the charter in order to set forth the amounts, would be problematic. Certainly with respect to at least changes in the future. If we sought to increase the amounts, for example, that would be one issue. And the problem is we would have the charter being amended by an ordinance, which would leave the charter kind of hanging. The charter would have, in effect, no longer accurate information in it, and someone would have to go elsewhere to see what exactly is the current state of affairs, an ordinance that we pass. So that makes sense to me. We shouldn't use that route, and I understand what Attorney Rollins was concerned about. But then the question was, well, how are we going to allow for increases, or let's put it this way, any changes in the amount in the future? So here's the language that was actually referred to us. The members of the town council shall receive an annual stipend of $5,000, and the town council president shall receive an annual stipend of $7,500. This may, from time to time, be adjusted by ordinance and approved by a majority of the qualified voters of the town of Bridgewater. Okay, that's what we voted on and approved, and that's what was sent to us. So I have kicked around for weeks. What do we do about some of these issues that some of which were raised by our discussion with Attorney Rawlins. And I thought, well, okay, we left this with the idea of putting in a floor, putting in a base amount, an initial amount, for example, the $5,000, and putting it in the charter. And that was a change from the initial plan, which was just to, if you remember, the original proposal going back now, what, to 2021, I guess, was to just strike the language in the charter where it says now, it basically says that counselors just aren't entitled to any kind of salary. Okay, so strike that, and then later amend the charter further to provide for an actual payment of a stipend. Okay, well, so we have the floor amount in there, that initial $5,000, right? So one of the issues is, how do we handle the question of modifications to that in the future? So that was one issue I looked at, and I thought, well, the only way that it seemed to me that we could absolutely use the charter and use the charter only to have both a floor and a ceiling amount, a highest amount, would be to actually put the highest amount in the charter. In other words, then the charter would completely answer the question of who gets paid, how much, etc. So in other words, we don't have to go back to an ordinance on top of the charter change to nail down any specific amount. So I'm just going to read what I had come up with, and what's in red are basically the edits, the changes that I proposed to the language that we were received. So I said, each member of the town council shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of $5,000, and the town council president shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of $7,500. The stipend amounts set forth herein may be increased by ordinance duly approved by vote of 2/3 of the town council, provided, however, that no annual stipend amount approved by ordinance may exceed $10,000. So just to stop there, my idea was, well, how do we satisfy kind of the need to basically put it all here in the charter? And also, we're trying to get into the head of voters, and what are they going to think when they see this on the ballot? Well, that's why we first came up with the notion of putting an amount in, because if we didn't put an amount in, the voters would see on the ballot a provision that would, suggest, hey, the town councilors have just voted themselves a salary. Well, how much? Okay, we decided we'll put that floor amount, that base amount, in the salary, in the charter, the $5,000. But I thought, well, if we can put a ceiling on it, and I just chose the amount of $10,000, then it's clear to anyone that based on the plain language of the charter, there's no way that can be exceeded. And what I said, just to go back for a minute, it said, duly approved by vote of 2/3 of the town council. And I made it 2/3, not a simple majority, 50%, 51%, because 2/3 just means we have to have 6 councilors voting in favor of it, as opposed to 5. It's not a tremendous difference, but it is a supermajority. And so I thought maybe that would give comfort to some people to see that, we at least need the 6 councilors to vote in favor of it, by that 2/3 amount. Provided, however, that no annual stipend amount, in other words, neither for the councilors nor for the president, approved by ordinance, may exceed $10,000. And I just finished that thought by saying, any modification of the annual stipend amounts less than $10,000 shall maintain the percentage allocated to the town council president of 150% of the amount provided to a member of the town council, as set forth herein. So I was just trying to preserve what seemed to be whose proposal was that? Was that Dennis's? I think that was Dennis's original thought, of, making available to the president of the council an amount 150% of the amount that we're giving to the other council members. And then I just included the language that Attorney Rollins had suggested we use for all of these charter amendments at the end of that. So this was about the only thing that I could come up with. And I picked the number of 10,000 as a ceiling just because I thought, well, it's reasonable. I mean, it's twice the $5,000 amount. But I thought there's probably more of an appetite if we were to put a ceiling like that rather than some higher amount. That's if we chose to put a ceiling amount. I mean, to me, it seemed to be the only way we could get around this problem of, if a higher amount is ever to be approved, having it being done by an ordinance, which would be contrary to the charter. So does any of that make sense to you, or do you have any particular thoughts on this?
I mean, I definitely like the fact of having a ceiling for any raise in any situation, so I definitely can see us putting a ceiling on, to be honest with you. I don't know if 10's too much or too little. I probably too much in my eyes, but still, ceiling is good. It is good. I mean, maybe if people hear a ceiling of 10,000, they might not want to vote for that too, because then they can say, well, what 6 people wouldn't vote to give themselves a $10,000 raise,
Well, that's true. And that's always going to be a concern when we think about how the voters would view this. And of course, I'm hoping that this gets us over the hurdle of, Attorney Rollins's concern about, the charter versus an ordinance. We'll have to see if that's even something that we consider doing. We'll have to, find out at the meeting what his thoughts on this would be. And about the $10,000 amount, again, it was just kind of a nice round number. We could. That's entirely something that we'd have to come up with if we have a ceiling amount, what the amount is. We could make it like, $7,000. And it, so in other words, there's a little bit of wiggle room from the 5,000 base amount, not a lot. I figured that the $10,000, ceiling, maybe for a number of years until such time as the charter would be amended again, maybe that would be suitable. I mean, just speaking for myself, I've been on the council for 5 years, and obviously I've not received any kind of stipend, and I'm fine with that. I wasn't expecting one when I joined the council. So am I suddenly expecting to go to $10,000? No, not necessarily. I do think about the comment that was made about the city of Brockton, the city council. I think that Councilor Lindy raised the point that the Brockton City Council is about to entertain. Did he say like a change from like 15,000 to 30,000 or something like that? He commented. I mean, we're talking apples and oranges here. I'm not comparing us in any respect to the city council in Brockton, but I think that, for towns and cities in the Commonwealth that do provide a stipend, even that high amount of $10,000, I don't think is going to make a lot of people squeamish. As I look around the Commonwealth, they're, again, I'm not to make a comparison, but I think it might be the city of Cambridge that has, something like a $60,000 or $70,000 stipend for city councilors. Again, there's no comparison we can draw, but I think the point is simply that, I don't know that people should be absolutely blown away by, that $10,000 amount, and certainly the $5,000 amount is, in my opinion, perfectly reasonable.
So I misunderstood that, and I thought the ceiling we were talking about was just raises. You're saying 10,000 is where we cap off at.
That's right. That's
Oh,
according to what I had, proposed here. It would be, until the charter changes again, which, would be years in the future, presumably. That 10,000 would be, or whatever figure we choose, would be a cap. That would be the ceiling.
Yeah.
And it would even apply to the president. The president wouldn't receive, under any circumstances, any higher amount than that either. That's the absolute, drop dead amount.
Yeah.
So, I could not think of another way to do this by putting an amount in the charter and without leaving it to an ordinance, to come up with a modification in the future, except to kind of sort of bracket this amount between 5 and 10 in the charter. That I thought, and since it specifically provides that it would need a supermajority vote of the council if we're going to go higher, it has to be adopted by an ordinance. Nobody gets a penny more than 10,000 under any circumstances. I kind of thought that might be suitable, but I'd love to hear any more comments.
No, that really sounds a lot better.
Councilor Chase, I'd just like to state that I think my opinion is that we should not have a ceiling, nor should we have any ability to increase. I would prefer to leave that to a charter change and a town vote from the citizens. I don't think that should be left for the councilors to decide when they get a raise. I think that should be a citizen choice. And so I understand the process is long and drawn out to change the charter, but I think necessary to add an additional 40 grand potentially to the town budget.
Okay, well, and that's certainly reasonable. I look at that, I look at your comment and I think, well, the town voters do get the final say because they would have to still approve this at the ballot box. So we could say, yes, we're voting ourselves this $10,000 amount, and come the end of April, and the voters say, "Oh no, you're absolutely not." So to my view, it was, that is the drop dead thing. I mean, the voters would have to approve this or not, and that's where they would get their say.
But why not have them approve the 5,000 and the 7,500 and leave it at that?
Well, we can do that. We could have just what came to us as a referral, 5,000 and 7,500, and therefore there's no provision in the charter for any modification, up or down for that matter, right? The town is just on the hook for those amounts, period. And that's, to me, that's fine. In terms of it's satisfactory, it would be in the plain language of the charter, and I don't think that from the town attorney's standpoint, I don't think he would have any concerns about it. I think that it's a question for the council overall. Are they concerned enough about the need in the future to modify the amount without going to a charter change, that they'd want to accept that? So that's a question for us tonight. Brad, what do you think if we did that? If we stripped out all that red language, right, and we just said, tell me if this sits well with you. We would have each member of the town council shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of $5,000, and the town council president shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of $7,500. Period. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a good place to start off for sure. I mean, I can agree with Paul when I say I don't know if we really even need to talk about raises or anything yet.
Okay.
But at the same time, I do understand that would take probably 4 to 6 years for a charter change for that.
Well, that's when the next, the usual route of a charter amendment committee. In other words, we could walk in next week and propose a charter change. I mean, that's actually what we're doing right here on this piece of paper. We're talking about changing the charter. The question is, well, a couple of questions. One question is, we're probably going to be subject to, having this become effective a year after it's actually voted by the council and approved, if it is, by the Commonwealth. It's probably going to, have a further stipulation that, a full calendar year will pass before it's actually, it has effect. So I guess the point is, if you think it's appropriate, and for both of you, we could just strip out all that language about, changes in the future and additional amounts, and just go with what was referred to us and with nothing further. Is that anything that anybody want a motion on that?
I will motion.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the motion is that we would, just looking at the text in black, it would read salary. Each member of the town council shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of $5,000, and the town council president shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of $7,500, period. And then just the language about approval by the state legislature and the voters.
Wait, sorry, Councilor Chase, before we move forward on that, we will still edit this following this proposed change, correct? In terms of adding, we're still going to work on it. This wouldn't be the final language.
Well, here's the question. So, in other words, you want to change the stipend proposal further?
Yes.
Is that okay? And how would you want to change it further?
I would just like to specify the dates that we discussed in the beginning.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we do this? If it's satisfactory to each of you. So we have the motion and a second to adopt that language. Why don't we have a roll call vote on that?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I think, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Murphy,
Yes.
Councilor McKinnon,
Yes.
and Councilor Chase.
Yes.
3-0, that motion passes.
Okay. So we've stripped down the language that came to us, and it's very bare boned. It's perfectly understandable. No tweaks. Okay. So the point you raised about payment. So those are the two questions. In other words, what period of time does the payment cover exactly, and when is this payment to be made?
And I guess Councilor Chase as well too. I don't know if we need to specify, but if a town councilor were not to complete their term, does that result in no payment, or does that result in partial payment?
So if I can talk real quick, something that I would think would be a good idea for this is, like we were talking about earlier, when the presidents and all that gets elected, you would get paid for the year that you served already. And then I think it's 21 meetings we have. Say you miss 3, you do 5. Say you're not a president. You do 5,000 divided by whatever, and you find out what the 3 meetings you missed, how much that would equal out, and you get rid of that, if anything. I mean, I think attendance should kind of be key if you're going to be getting paid. I know we all do things like this on the side too, but that could be a kind of a good idea.
Okay, so that proposal then is, Brad, that we would use we would prorate the stipend amount, which would be reduced by an appropriate percentage for any number of meetings that the counselor has missed. Did I state that?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
We have 20.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I think we have 21 meetings a year. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And I mean, I've missed one. Not saying if you're zooming in, that's considered missing it. I'm just saying if you're fully out there, I don't know. I don't think you should really get paid not being there. Because like I
Okay.
said,
I
myself,
think
go ahead, Paul.
I was gonna say I think I would only challenge that in the thought that I think attendance is more important above everything. But if a town councilor were to miss it, a 2-hour meeting on a Tuesday, but they happen to put in, 10 hours of work that week, should they still really lose out on that week's worth of pay if you look at it from that sense?
No, I get that 100% because I know we all do plenty of other stuff besides just these committee meetings when it comes to the community.
I guess that is the point that, we do spend X number of hours every other week, but for everyone, there's a certain amount of committee work. There might be certain engagements, including, quote unquote social engagements that nonetheless have importance to the town. Attending meetings for the in connection with the downtown revitalization effort. Community meetings, things of that sort. So there are other factors. Plus, even kind of doing our homework. When it comes down to corresponding with constituents, or preparing things like in connection with tonight's meeting. Preparing items for discussion or debate. So I see the point. There's the actual number of meetings, be it 21 or whatever it is one factor, but I don't know if that's the only criteria that should apply. It's hard to nail down. And the other side of that is that it's also, I think, potentially a bookkeeping nightmare for the town. For the town to have to keep, in effect, kind of an attendance roster of, were we here for both meetings in October or were we not? And do that on an annual basis for 9 people. I see the point, and philosophically, I understand the position that, if you're not showing up and you're not somehow doing the work, then you're not entitled to this pay. But, without having like a time clock, um, I think it's going to be very hard to judge because we do have work outside of the council chamber, and we do other town related things. So that's a tough one. And I think it's a kind of a question that it's entirely appropriate for us to talk about it here. I think it's actually something, though, that in the full council we would have to introduce and basically say, hey guys, this idea came up, and philosophically, you can't argue with it. If the person's not here or not producing, there's an issue with should they be paid the same amount as the person who does show up and produce. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could I'm not sure if we're going to make a motion for Brad's language or not, but could I propose that we do a payment term of election day to the following election day year? And with terms that say if the counselor chooses to step down or is removed for any reason, they will receive no payment.
Okay. So from election day to election day.
Yes.
Okay. So that establishes the year term that we're talking about. And you also raise the point that if a counselor either steps down or is removed, is recalled,
right?
That so they're being paid in advance. In other words, so you're elected. I mean, isn't that what you're thinking?
I'm sorry, they'd be paid at the end of that second year. The term is still election day to election day. However, right. The payment would be that second election day, as if to say they completed a full year of service.
Okay, so we'd be paid in arrears. Okay,
yes.
We already would have done the work for a year, and
Correct.
Then we get our pay. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we'd be paid in arrears, election day to election day, And in the event that someone either is removed from the council or vacates their seat for any reason, what would happen there? It would be prorated.
I would like to say that they will not be paid, I mean, any amount for stipend. I think I I don't know if we want to get into the math of doing prorated and how that works out. I think there's a lot that we'll probably go into that, but
Well,
I
yeah,
would say that
you're right. This does, to kind of get into it at all means we have to, jump in with both feet. You're right. That's the problem.
yeah.
So, in other words, let's think about the extreme case. We've got a counselor who's elected in April, and he has for a 3-year term. So the next April, he's expecting his payment, but in February, he had a change in his job, and he had to move out of town to move to Boston. So he served most of his term, but he's not receiving any compensation for it. That's you get into those kinds of situations. I mean, you can, for recall, you can always take the position of, well, if somebody either broke the law or they did something really bad ethically, okay, well, the heck with them, they're just not going to get their pay. Okay, well, I guess you can say that. But for somebody who's actually done their job and showed up, and then maybe for a very short period of time, they had to leave their position. They moved out of the district or they moved out of the town, and they wind up empty-handed, I guess. So
Maybe we something like 75% of the term or something. I do understand that if someone's done almost the whole thing, but if someone gets recalled, that's definitely probably someone that shouldn't get paid.
Well, that's kind of my outlook is if you were recalled, because remember, we'll talk about recall later, and what the council agreed to already is that a councilor won't be recalled just because people in town don't like the particular vote they took, right? So in other words, if they are going to be recalled, it's because they either broke a law, or they did something that is unethical, and it even prescribes, you'll remember, we'll see it again, it would require like an actual ruling from the state ethics commission or the attorney general. So pretty serious stuff, in which case I agree, oh yeah, I mean, then don't pay them, don't give them anything. I mean, I'm fine with that. It's the other case that I'm apprehensive about. So Brad mentioned, maybe applying a formula like a 75%. Like if they showed up for 75% of the meetings, is that what you're?
It's 75% of meetings, 75% of the term, something along the lines of just about 3/4 of what they needed to do. I can see around 50%, they probably shouldn't get paid. But if I'm not going to say 60, but if you're over 50, not drastically, but around 70, 75, I think you probably should get paid.
So
right.
Maybe I could propose to build off Brad's suggestion. We're going under the assumption that everybody receives a stipend of $5,000 at once throughout the course of the year. Would it be possible that we split that stipend up quarterly, and now 5,000 is distributed quarterly? And does that solve your question, Brad, of if you've made it through 50% of the year, you've now gotten paid 50%?
I mean, that definitely does help it out for sure. I do like the sound of that. I don't think that would be too tricky to do and make too much extra work. Especially, I mean, this report quarterly, all that, that is kind of a better idea than what I said for sure.
Well, that does get us over that hurdle of, finding a way to quantify what somebody has done, which gets very murky. The homework side of things and the outside of council chambers type of thing. So quarterly payment, that's a whole new concept. So I guess we'd actually need to go back to what we've already drafted and approved. The language that we talked about, each counselor gets $5,000 and the president receives $7,500. Thanks, Deb. So we could simply add to make it, I think, unmurky, if not clear. We could, to that one paragraph that ends with that $7,500 figure in numbers, we could just add a sentence, for example, that says, payment of all stipends shall be, I was going to say computed. I don't know if that's what they were. So, shall be provided on a quarterly basis.
Now we get into the question of defining quarters, right?
Well, yes, but what I think in this case, I'm inclined to think that if the town manager saw this language, that he would be able to instruct I was going to say payroll department, I guess, instruct the human resources people to just do this on a quarterly basis. In other words, let's say at the end of March or maybe into the beginning of April of each year, there'd be a quarterly payment, just on a regular 3-month basis. I mean,
so we'd have to know that though, right? Because to your point, if somebody were to step down on March 31st and the payments go out April 1st,
okay,
that would matter, right?
Yes, it could. So how could maybe we can actually refine the language. Yeah. Payment of all stipends on a quarterly basis. So maybe instead of a period there, shall be provided on a quarterly basis to counselors what could we say? To counselors. I'm going to say to counselors who are still counselors. To counselors, it's really incumbent, right? I mean, to incumbent counselors. So in other words, you still have to be a counselor. Incumbent, yep. To incumbent counselors, as of the first business day of the coming quarter. Yeah. That's what I think. Let's think about payment of all stipends shall be provided on a quarterly basis to incumbent counselors. You've got to still be a counselor as of the first business day of the I would say of the next coming quarter. And let's think about that. So March comes along, a quarter has been completed, the new quarter begins in April, and so as of the first business day of April, if they're still an incumbent counselor, they're due to receive this amount.
Counselor, now I'm questioning my thought. Now I'm thinking, are we making this too difficult that it needs to be? So maybe it is possible to say a stipend of $5,000, should a counselor step down or be removed or vacate the position, the stipend will be prorated. Can we leave it? I guess the question is, could we leave it at that? And then the accounting team that distributes payment would then do the proration there.
That's what I'm thinking, is that we're getting a little too much into their purview. And maybe you're right. Maybe that's the way to do it. Prorated and leave it to them to
Right.
do the nitty gritty.
And it would be no different from a salary town employee if they were to leave their job, in the middle of the year, they were
Yep.
getting the salary up until that point. So there has to be an equation behind the scenes for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I like that approach better. So what we were saying was, let's think, payments. Let's think.
I would just say payments, should we define that? Do we define it? Counselors that sit a full term will be paid on the pursuant or next election day. You can't say that because a special election could occur too, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I guess you'd have to say the next
Annual?
regular town election day, but if you wanted to do that.
Okay.
But what about, so let's go back to the pro rata idea for a minute.
Yeah,
So,
I was going to define the ones that make it the full calendar year would be paid
right.
on the next election day, regular election day. And then the next sentence would be, if a town councilor were to vacate the position, they would receive a prorated stipend amount. Can it be as simple as that?
Let's try it. So how about, what if we said, let's think this through. What if we said incumbent counselors, okay, counselors who are actually in the council, shall receive a stipend shall receive a stipend upon each regularly scheduled town election day. I think if you go back, Deb, can you change upon and change that to as of?
Right.
Let's just, so incumbent counselors shall receive a stipend as of each regularly scheduled town election, annual town election. That's what we need. Each annual town election.
What if we cut out election and say full year of service?
Well, yes, but that goes back to the question of what's full year. In other words,
after election would be the full year.
When you're
well, see, we know the election is year to year. That will be a full year.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, you could do this on kind of a, I don't even want to say, like on a calendar year basis. That gets us into a whole different.
Okay, we'll keep election then. Annual town election.
Right, the incumbent councilors shall receive a stipend. After stipend, Deb, I would think about adding just the words receive a stipend as above set forth. As above set forth, right? As above, as of, now as of, right? As of, in other words, not on each election day, but as of each annual town election day, right? So it's just setting, that's the period.
Does that define it enough? Like, are we saying in here 1 full year of service, or are we just saying, like, how am I saying I was elected as a town councilor? That's an election day. Why aren't I paid day 1?
Okay, this goes back to then arrears, first of all, because we're
Right.
not being paid in advance, we're being paid in arrears. So you're going to annual stipend. If you go back to the top line, Deb, and maybe after shall receive an annual stipend up in the top line, if you can put a comma after stipend, and I would say payable in arrears. Right. Shall receive an annual stipend payable in arrears in the amount of blah, blah, blah. We should just for clarity say the same thing for the president. Shall receive an annual stipend in the amount of annual stipend payable in arrears in the amount of 5,000. Okay. Shall receive an annual stipend payable in arrears, right, in the amount of, and there's the amount, period. Incumbent counselors shall receive a stipend as above set forth as of each annual town election day. I would just capitalize the words town and election to show that we are talking about a very specific thing that's also described in the charter. So, when the town actually cuts the check and when the town actually has to, put it in our hands, that's up to town administration.
Should just
What
be
do you?
after that election day.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
So, does that much sound good to you?
I think so.
Okay.
Me too.
You think it's good, Brad? Okay. All right. I say let's go with it.
Shall I make a motion?
Sure.
Making a
Who was that,
motion
Brad?
language. Yeah, let's.
Wait, but we didn't add the prorated part. Do we need to do that before we?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. We glossed right over that. So, how about what if we were to say, think about this, absences resulting from I'm going to say departure from the town council, or how about just absence? No. Okay, I would go back to the beginning of that sentence again and say, how about counselors serving less than one full year?
I think it's better to say counselors who vacate their position will receive a prorated payment on date of, what do we say? Not termination, but date of
Resignation.
Yeah, I guess, but it might not be a resignation either, right? If they were recalled.
Right, if they were recalled, for example, yeah. Prorated on as of the last date of their service.
Yeah, let's leave it as that, right?
Let's see how that sounds. So incumbent counselors shall receive a stipend as set forth. I would say as set forth. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't even read my own words. As above set forth. As of each annual town election day, counselors who vacate their, I would say, maybe change position to office, who vacate their office. You're elected to serve an office. Will be entitled to receive, I think, will be entitled to receive a prorated payment as of the last date of their service. What do you think?
I think that's good.
Good catch on that, Paul. I forgot. That went right by me, the prorated payment. I thought we already had that in there, but that, I like that. Like I said, I'd make a motion to approve that language too, right there.
Okay. I like it. So we have a motion.
I think that day needs to be capitalized, right? Town
Town
election day, Debbie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Well, yeah, town election day.
'Cause it's,
Let's, yeah, that's fine.
okay. Sorry, that was a moment. But go ahead, Brad.
I would just make one little tweak, maybe. How about where it says counselors? I would say maybe a counselor. I just don't like to pluralize if it's not necessary from the context. So a counselor who vacates their office will be entitled to receive a prorated payment. How about a prorated stipend? Keep
Yeah.
the terms the same.
Yeah.
As of the last date of their service. I think it's good. So what we've covered, right? We've got proration.
The day.
We've got the term established by election day to election day, and we're just sticking with the basic idea of 5,000 and 7,500. Any other? Did we? Oh, why don't we vote on that? I'll second that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. We just need a roll call, right? Or do I need
Yep.
a motion?
Yeah. We have a motion in a second.
Counselor McKinnon,
Yes.
Counselor Murphy,
Yes.
and Counselor Chase.
Yes.
3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay. So was there anything else we needed to consider as far as the stipend?
I think so.
I think we hit everything.
Okay. I think it's all pretty clean, and we'll see what folks think. But we've answered a number of the questions that, and for that matter, we've answered questions that weren't even really raised yet. So much the better. All right. So shall we move on to the other item, which is proposed ordinance FY 22-009, Bridgewater Town Charter Article 2, Legislative Branch recall provision. And so first thing I would just note is that title is still wrong, because that was the very first item we addressed at the meeting before the full council, and it's actually Article 3, elected officials. That was the discussion that I had, that I raised kind of a point of order, and it was answered by the president, who had been serving at the time on the Rules and Procedures Committee that gave us the original language that came out in 2021. And remember that the reason I raised this was, if it remained as Article 2, legislative branch, that only pertains to the town councilors. And if instead, as the last Rules and Procedures Committee recommended, they made the change to Article 3, elected officials, meaning it's 3 groups of elected officials in Bridgewater. It's the town council, the board of library trustees, and the town clerk. And that is what was intended by Rules and Procedures way back when. And it's actually what was originally done some years ago, when this charter proposal first came to see the light of day. So, so that doesn't need our action because that's already been done. It's just that what's in front of us, reading Article 2, legislative branch, is wrong, and it should be Article 3, elected officials. Now, so in the council, we approved a few things. We approved the change of the word city to the word town. We approved substituting the word offenses in place of the word grounds, both very simple. And then I had that big block of language that I got from the town of Hanson that we talked about, which we did approve. One amendment that was made when we talked about this, Councilor George made the amendment renumbering, because remember there was a paragraph that was misnumbered. There were like
5 or 6.
2 5s, or I guess that's what it was. Actually, a 6 that should have been a 5. So then that correction was made, and we approved the language. Now, so a couple of things came up as we talked about this in council, and one was really surprising to me, but that's okay. When I thought in advance about this, when I thought about all the things that people could object to and, you know, find unsettling or just not want to deal with it, I think the last thing on my mind would have been the numbered paragraph, which is the numbered paragraph 6, which is correctly actually paragraph 5, which reads lack of fitness, insobriety while performing official functions, involuntary commitment to a mental health facility, being placed under guardianship or conservatorship by a probate court. Okay. Who knows? You never know, right? Well, so there were several people who weren't comfortable with that. Now, I remember one counselor who first made comments about it felt that it was referring to people who, as we would say colloquially, you know, are dealing with issues. Okay. Well, if we look at the language, it talks about involuntary commitment to a mental health facility. And you might remember there was another counselor who said, looking at those words, who said, well, that's pretty serious stuff. You know, if you're involuntarily committed to a mental health facility, it's not like, oh, you're just suffering from anxiety, or you just have depression, or you're on some medication, or you're undergoing therapy. It's none of those things, none of them. If you look at Mass General laws, which I did after our meeting, there are actually 3 sections of law in Massachusetts that deal with commitment, committing someone involuntarily. So the first is Chapter 123, Section 35. It's civil commitment, and it has to do with drug or alcohol abuse. Okay, it's civil, it's not criminal, but you can be committed for a period of time. Chapter 123, Section 12 deals with involuntary psychiatric holds. So that would include things like if someone suggests, actually verbally indicates that they're contemplating suicide, for example, or contemplating physically harming someone, right? And if they express that to a licensed mental health worker, it's the legal obligation of that mental health worker to file paperwork for this person to be involuntarily committed for a period of 3 days. I know a lawyer who was subject to this. She actually suggested to her counselor that she was contemplating suicide. And by the end of that afternoon, she was involuntarily committed for 3 days until it was determined that she was not actually likely to harm herself or someone else. So that's, again, another form of civil commitment. But then there's a final section, section 123A, chapter 123A, section 6A, which is criminal commitment. And it is primarily for sexually dangerous persons. I looked at that law. Interestingly, it actually names the town of Bridgewater. Can you imagine why? It's because we play host to the state's Center for Sexually Dangerous Persons, right down Route 18. Okay. So these are the manners in which somebody in Massachusetts can be involuntarily committed, whether for just a brief period or for an indeterminate period. So I only bring this up to give some clarity to what's meant by involuntary commitment. Now, as you know, I included this just because I took that whole statute, that whole bylaw from the town of Hanson. I didn't change a period of it. I just wanted to take the whole thing and put the right in the body of what I was proposing. I don't personally have any preference as to, whether we include this or not. Someone apparently thought it was advisable to include. It's not my call, and if it were the consensus of us or of the council next week to strike that, I don't lose any sleep over it.
Yeah.
Anyone have any comments?
I mean, none here.
No.
I liked everything that I saw on that Hanson paper. I think that really should be law. I honestly already thought we had something in place like that, so I was surprised to find out we didn't. And I mean, it's kind of pretty simple, I feel like, with what the Hanson does, just saying be a good person,
Yeah, I mean, I can see the point, and even the council president mentioned this, the lack of fitness, and he expressed some concern about that because it's imprecise. Well, wait a minute, what does it mean, lack of fitness? And who decides, and what's the criteria? I get that. I thought there was more apprehension over the involuntary commitment part, but if we go back to the council, if it's there, the same people are going to express discomfort over it.
Councilor Chase, I know I was one of those people, and I guess I would just make a point of if somebody were committed into just a regular medical facility for, and you could define it as involuntarily for a heart attack or some health related issue, would that herein be covered as well too? And if not,
I
why?
would say no, because what it says is involuntary commitment to a mental health facility.
Why wouldn't we include that for a regular medical facility?
Well, okay, how does that work? Well, when you go to you always have the opportunity to dismiss yourself. That's not what I mean. To remove yourself from a medical facility, right? Even if the doctor says, you can't do this, I'm refusing, I won't let you do it, you're going to die tomorrow if you leave here now, right? You can there's a word for it. You can leave the facility, quote unquote, against medical advice. Okay. But you're free to go. My wife is a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And she works currently at Boston Medical Center. She worked at other Boston hospitals, but she's been there for now a number of years. And Boston Medical Center, located at, you probably know, Mass and Cass in Boston, And much of their clientele are underserved populations.
Mhm.
Okay. There are many patients with mental health issues, as well as medical issues. People there frequently, you know, don't want to stay for procedures. They don't want to be admitted, whatever. And they leave the hospital against medical advice. Okay. Because they're free to do that, but anyone is. But when you're involuntarily committed to a mental health facility in accordance with one of those statutes I mentioned, you are not free to leave. You're either going to be there for the 3-day period if it's that section, or certainly if you're being sent to Bridgewater, you might be there for an indeterminate period. There are people who've stayed at the facility in Bridgewater for years, right? Because they're just not, I don't want to say competent, but they are actually a danger to the community or to themselves. So if you're involuntarily committed to a mental health facility, first of all, on a practical basis, how could you attend town council meetings? Well, remotely, I guess, right? But
Well,
you know,
what about in the case of the statute that you mentioned? If it were a 3-day period,
right?
you were committed.
Well, as on a practical level, to be honest with you, no one would even know.
Right.
Right. The only reason I knew about the particular person I mentioned is that she actually divulged it. She actually told me. Remember, HIPAA regulations would
Right.
would prevent us from talking about anyone's personal issues, physical or mental, right? And if someone's gone for 3 days, they took a weekend. They took a little holiday. You know, who knows? Who knows where they are? So we probably would never know that. And anyway, in 3 days they would literally be back, and you know, I it just wouldn't be material. So I only, you know, just for clarity, I just wanted to bring that up. I don't have a preference. You know, if somebody made a motion to strike that particular item, you know, I'm fine. Otherwise, we can bring it back to council as is. We can have the same discussion with people then, if that's appropriate, or people just won't, or people will let it impact their vote either way based on it being in. But someone made a determination in Hanson to put that in. Now, just one more word real quickly about Hanson. One of the counselors mentioned that Hanson has had recall petitions, recall proposals in the past, and they have. And the counselor went on to say, well, so they're not exactly anyone to speak about recall. Like, what do they know? They've had recalls in the past. And actually, I take exactly the opposite approach. They're the best people to learn from because they've gone through recalls. And that's why they came up with language like this, because they apparently, I'm willing to bet, had a period or had an instance where some counselors were subject to recall on the basis of votes. And they decided and they voted and approved this language saying that no, that won't be the part of it in the future. If you break the law, yeah, sure, you're suitable for recall. If you violate, you know, ethics, you know, to the extent that you actually get called by the, you know, for a violation by the state ethics commission or the attorney general, yeah, that's pretty serious. Yeah, you've breached the public trust if you've done that, and that's exactly contrary to your oath of office. So that's suitable, you know. But if you voted for a tax increase, and you know some people in town want your head for that, no, that's not suitable, because the townspeople elected you to make decisions. And they trusted you when they elected you because they trusted you to make informed decisions. But they left the decisions to you. And if they didn't intend you to have the power to make decisions, they shouldn't have elected you. So that's my take on that. But anyway.
I will say number 4 does address the attendance at less than 50% of proposed public meetings as an option for recall as well too. So
okay.
I guess that would cover long-term absence.
Oh, so you're saying, I'm not sure. Are you saying that that's appropriate or something you'd want not?
I'm sorry, I say that's appropriate, but I'm going to move to strike the commitment to a mental health facility.
Okay.
For the reason based on having number 4 that relates to attendance, because I agree with your last statement that you were elected to do a job, and we've talked about attendance already. And also for the purpose of not wanting to have this held up when it was discussed previously in the council.
Okay.
It would be best to strike it and move forward with the rest of the language we have.
So would you say, is your position to actually strike, well, it's
from
it's
the comma, I would say from the comma. Sorry, are you asking
from, from the comma. So in other words, okay, the way it reads right now is lack of fitness, insobriety while performing official functions, involuntary commitment to a mental health facility.
I would strike that from comma to comma, involuntarily commitment of a mental health facility.
Okay. Okay, so the way it would read, if we were to do that, is lack of fitness, insobriety while performing official functions, being placed under guardianship or conservatorship by a probate court.
Correct.
Okay. So that's your motion.
I'll second
and
it.
You, Brad, you would second that? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I have no difficulty with taking that out. So I would say let's have a vote on it.
Councilor McKinnon,
Yes.
Councilor Murphy,
Yes.
and Councilor Chase.
Yes.
3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay. So we at least know that we're not going to have that hurdle to deal with. You know, people might still, you know, go back to the lack of fitness, insobriety, you know, but we can talk about that.
Yeah.
And
then Councilor Chase, I'm sorry, Brad, go ahead. You first.
I was just saying, I do like how we did just write that down because, like you said, the whole HIPAA law or the HIPPA, however you say it, how are we supposed to know someone even got committed? You know?
Yeah, certainly if it's for a 3-day period, we're likely not to know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, what the most is over a 3-day period that, you know, somebody misses a council meeting. Well, you know, that happens now and we don't know necessarily where they are or why they're not there. So that, you know, anyway. Okay, well, all right. So we took that out. So
I wonder, Councilor Chase, if that, I mean, I guess we've already stricken it, so it wouldn't be a question. I was going to say, I wonder if it would be a question for Attorney Rollins. Is that a HIPAA violation, just having that simple statement in there? But
no, you know, it's a question. I don't know what his thought would be, but I think, what would be the impact of HIPAA? Well, here's what I think. If we look at what's left in here,
yeah,
you know, just talking about sobriety and where is it, and you know, lack of fitness, sobriety while performing official. Well, if someone is not sober while performing official functions, even there, we could argue, well, you know, someone was slurring their speech,
right,
and they looked very glassy-eyed at the council meeting, and they sounded a little weird. I think they were not sober. And then we might find out that they've been, you know, fighting some cold, I'll say. And so they took some they took some NyQuil before they came to the meeting, and they were a little, you know, kind of disoriented, or just you know, ordinary people can't necessarily tell, you know, kind of without the whiff of alcohol, right? You know, if someone is, you know, either under the influence or if there's something else going on. Um, so, well, you raised the point about HIPAA. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the take would be. We certainly don't want to be in a position of, making public anyone's problems or issues, and we don't. If someone is, missing from a string of council meetings, we might inquire among ourselves, where is so and so? They haven't been around. Maybe the town manager's office might have information, for example, and tell us, well, we understand he's been ill. I mean, who are we to argue with that? Why would we even dig for more information? Oh, really? He's ill. Well, what's the problem? Yeah, on a neighbor to neighbor basis, yeah, you might do exactly that and say, yeah, what's that person's problem? But in the context of, colleagues on the council, we're certainly not publicly going to disclose anyone's issue.
Counselor Chase, can I add one more question that's going to make this more complicated, please?
Okay.
The language is suggestive, right? So in the beginning of this paragraph, it says, well, excuse me, right before we start listing things, it says, this section shall include, but is not limited to, the following transgressions. So a good
Right.
example of this is we may have stricken the words involuntary commitment to a mental health facility, but due to the language, that could still be a reason for a recall.
It could still come back in.
So
yeah, no, you're right.
My bigger question would be, what benefit is there of adding all these examples? Are we only making it more complicated by doing so?
I think what it's doing is it's taking infractions of law. These are all violations of law, and
lack of fitness isn't a violation of law.
Well, it could be. Again, here's where this kind of goes to what the president was saying. What does that mean, lack of fitness? What I think is intended by it is sort of, the idea of, moral turpitude, right? Okay, you didn't break a law exactly, and you weren't necessarily guilty of like a conflict of interest violation or something like that. But it's public knowledge that you're cohabitating outside of your marital relationship with another party. Okay, all right, that's moral turpitude. Okay, what if someone on the council were found to be a lone wolf and had a political agenda to accomplish outside of standard political practice, and they were arrested on a terrorism charge? Well, that's not enumerated here. We don't say anything about terrorism, right? Okay, that falls under, but not be limited to. Okay, that would be something egregious enough that they should not serve on the council, but it's not enumerated, but it's logically well enough covered under, but not limited to. That would be my contention if I brought forward the charge. So it's not intended to be an absolute, soup to nuts list, but all these violations of law deal with actions that should disqualify a person from serving the public trust. Okay, we don't have
may, really not should. I mean, the language is may.
Right? Well, right. I mean, it's remember, here again, it comes to the voters, just like that last issue we talked about, that ultimately the voters decide, right? Because that would enable somebody to bring forth a petition to recall someone, but ultimately that has to go to the ballot in order to be approved, that recall petition. right? So there'd be a recall election in effect. So in other words, these are just the reasons that are most obvious that represent a breach, either a violation of law or a breach of duty that's really central to the public trust obligation that a public official has. We don't include in here, bank robbery, but if one of us as a counselor during our term is found guilty of having robbed a bank, yeah, that falls under, but not limited to. I would say.
Well, that falls under number 7 too. I mean, number 7's violation of law.
Right. Conviction
Right.
of, right, or violation of law.
So that covers
Regulation by the.
all your examples.
So it's broad enough for the public, for the voters, to actually bring forth an action to recall a counselor or other town official. But the ultimate decision is still going to be made by the voters at a recall election. Do they believe that or not?
Right.
So that's kind of how it works. So I didn't, when I first saw the language, I thought, well, this is pretty sweeping. This covers most anything I can think of that would cause me to think a public official had breached their trust or violated law in such a way as they should not be eligible to serve. So, do we have any other matters at all on this?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, so where we left off, we these are the changes we made in council already, and the council did vote to approve this language. What we've done is we've stricken the involuntary commitment language. And that's all we've done. We did vote on that. That's right. So is there any other point of this that we need to consider further?
No, I have not.
I would just say I know that Debbie had copied my bold facing of the last sentence, which I had just done for emphasis, but I think in our final version of it we should just take out the bolding, and it should just appear normally before the council next time.
And Debbie, in that same paragraph under number 6, there's conviction O, the letter O, bribery. I think it says I think it's supposed to say just a small spelling mistake there.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that and I didn't mention it. Yeah, let's see. Right, the letter O.
Yep, I found it.
O, bribery. Oh, one more point. Paul, you brought this up of just changing the making the terms not gender specific.
Oh yes.
So, for example, about 2/3 of the way into the paragraph under item 3, I think. Where's 4? I can't. 4. I'm sorry. It's under item 4. Attendance at less than 50% of the posted public meetings, et cetera, was an elected member or to which he/she. So if we wanted to do that, we could take out the he/she and change that to read was an elected member or to which the official. Just insert the words the official in place of he/she. The official has been elected or appointed as part of, and here's a his/her, and that could be changed to simply their, as part of their elected position, to make it gender neutral. Is that something, Paul, you'd want to do?
Yes, please. Can I make a motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, good. All right, so motion second, and if we could vote on those two gender specific changes?
Yep. Counselor McKinnon,
Yes.
Counselor Murphy,
Yes.
and Counselor Chase.
Yes.
3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, so the he, she gets changed to the official, and the his, her gets changed to their.
Yep.
And that takes care of that. So I think, are we complete?
Think so.
Okay. We have nothing else on the agenda. I keep feeling like we're missing something, but I don't think we are. I think we've covered a lot.
Sure.
I think it was actually very productive, and believe me, I'm glad to get this out of the way. It's been kind of lingering because of, just our schedules and whatnot. But so Deb, let me ask you, we meet on the 10th, a week from tonight.
Yep.
And will we be able to return these for a final vote?
On the 10th, they have to be referred to advertising. Do you have
I
to
was just
vote?
about to correct myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have to vote to send these back to town council?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what we'll do.
Okay.
So
So they probably won't go on till the 24th.
okay.
I might be able to fit them on the 10th. There's a lot on the 10th.
Well, then we probably shouldn't push it. I mean, these do go back to 2021 after all.
Right.
But okay, well, I would make a motion that the changes that we have voted be returned to the council with a recommendation for council approval. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. And if we could have a roll call vote just on that, Deb?
Counselor McKinnon,
Yes.
Counselor Murphy,
Yes.
and Counselor Chase.
Yes. Okay.
3 in favor, 0 opposed.
That is great. So I guess we would have to entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay.
Counselor McKinnon,
Yes.
Counselor Murphy,
Yes.
and Counselor Chase.
Yes. Thank you very much,
3.
everyone.
Have a
Thank you,
good
guys.
night.
Have a
Have
good
a good
weekend.
night.
Bye.
Thank you. You too.